On this day in 1931, Celtic lost 1-0 to Fall River on their summer tour of North America. The 1920s and 30s was a period of massive underachievement for Celtic, who did not win the league championship between 1926 and 1936, with only a solitary Motherwell title win in 1931-32, preventing Rangers from winning 10 titles in a row. But they came agonisingly close to taking the title in 1930-31 and won the Scottish Cup after a replayed final against Motherwell, meaning they were able to take the trophy with them to show off to exiled fans on their tour of North America that summer. It was a team that would be torn apart by tragedy by the end of the year, with the death of John Thompson in September and the forced retirement of Peter Scarfe because of tuberculosis, which was then incurable, in December. Scarfe sadly died 2 years later at the age of just 24. But it was with a sense of great optimism for the future that Celtic set out across the Atlantic on the 13th of May 1931, a 1,000-strong crowd gathering at Yorkhill Quay, Partick, to see them off on the TSS Caledonia. John Kearney writes in his biography of Jimmy McGrory, Heroes Are Forever, "If 1,000+ supporters waved them off from Yorkhill Quay with their green and white banners raised high above their heads, singing 'Will you no come back again?' similar crowds stood on both sides of the Clyde and cheered them all the way to Greenock. It was indeed a royal progress downriver to the tail of the bank. And all this for a football club. But this is no ordinary club, as Billy McNeill was later to say. After making a port of call at Belfast, the Caledonia turned into the open seas and pointed her bows towards New York." The sense of optimism and excitement was shared by all except manager Willie Maley, seriously unhappy that the directors would not allow his brother Tom to accompany him on the trip. Maley took to his cabin, insisting he was gravely ill, and on arrival in New York, confined himself to his bed and demanded that Tom be sent for to take him home. By the time Tom Maley arrived in New York, Willie had made a remarkable recovery, and the elder Maley was his constant companion for the rest of the tour. Kearney writes that Celtic received a hero's welcome everywhere they played in the States, and that it had a distinctly Irish Catholic atmosphere, with McGrory writing in a diary he kept on the tour, "The only thing they didn't sing was Faith of Our Fathers." Gerald McNee writes in The Story of Celtic that the adulation greeting them throughout the tour hampered their preparation for the matches. "It was a reception which went on and was really no preparation for playing football, even if the games were termed friendlies. Jubilation and feasting became routine as exiles travelled hundreds of miles to catch a glimpse of their heroes and the Scottish Cup. To add to all the clamour, Celtic players had also to contend with the humid heat of the Atlantic seaboard. After a 6-1 win over Philadelphia All-Stars and a 3-2 victory over New York Giants, Celtic lost 4-3 to New York Yankees at Boston's Fenway Park on the 30th of May, a defeat that would be avenged with a 4-1 win at the Yankee Stadium on the 28th of June. The Yankees' defeat was followed 24 hours later by a match in Rhode Island against Fall River, a team based in Bristol County, Massachusetts. Like almost all of Celtic's opponents on the tour, Fall River had a smattering of Scottish players, including Willie "Red" Ballantyne, formerly of Clyde, Bill Patterson, ex-Cowdenbeath and Derby County, and Billy Watson, once of Ayr United. Celtic were struggling to acclimatise themselves to the intense heat. John Kearney writes of the aftermath of the Yankees' defeat, "It may have been a simple matter of sunstroke. Some of the others were so dehydrated they couldn't walk after the game. They were hardly recovered by the next day when they had to meet Fall River, where they lost again, this time 1-0 on a ground like concrete. The result was severe blisters all round. McGrory blamed the dreadful conditions entirely. I'm sure if we got both these teams together, we would take 5 or 6 goals from them." In scorching heat, Celtic lined up in Marks Stadium, Tiverton, Rhode Island. J. Thompson, Cook, McGonigal, Wilson, McStay, Geetins, R. Thompson, A. Thompson, McGrory, Scarfe, Napier. After the match was kicked off by the Mayor of Fall River, Dan F. Sullivan, Celtic failed to impress their hosts. George M. Collins reported in the Boston Globe of the 1st of June 1931, "The Celtics looked like an ordinary team. They may have been afraid of that hard pitch, but none of their stars displayed anything to write home about." The game was a big disappointment to the 6,000 fans who expected to see the Celtics bewilder the Fall River team, but when they failed to produce anything that looked like a winning brand of soccer, many left the grounds. Contrary to expectations, the match turned out to be evenly contested. The Scotsman reported on the 2nd of June 1931, "After Mayor Sullivan had kicked off, the American League team swarmed all over their opponents and shot after shot was rained at Jay Thompson, who, however, was his usual brilliant self. The Scottish forwards broke away on several occasions, but the rival goalkeeper was equally clever and dealt capably with their shots. Assisted by the breeze in the second half, Celtic pressed hotly and corner after corner came their way, but their efforts were frustrated by the fine defensive work of the American team." Only one Celtic player really impressed the Americans. George M. Collins reporting, "Peter Wilson of the Celtics is one sweet halfback. He traps the ball with the best of them, and when it comes to carpet passing, he is in a class by himself." Fall River scored the only goal 2 minutes from the end after a misjudgment from John Thompson, who had had an uncharacteristically wobbly game against New York Yankees. Collins reported, "McGonigal fouled Ballantyne and the free kick was taken by Watson. Billy lobbed the ball in for goal. It was a well-placed shot, not having any steam behind, but lo and behold, Johnny Thompson watched the flight of the ball. When he thought it was not going over the bar as he surmised, he jumped for it, but it was too late. The ball was in the back of the net." It was an embarrassing setback for Celtic, the second in 2 days, and another defeat followed against Pawtucket Rangers on the 6th of June. But as the players adapted to the conditions, they looked a lot more like themselves and finished the tour with a record of 9 wins in 13 games with 3 defeats and 1 draw, scoring 48 goals for the loss of 18. McNee writes in The Story of Celtic, "It was a tired group which boarded the liner Transylvania to return home, although they had the deep contentment of knowing that they had given so much pleasure to so many exiles who had dreamed for years of such a visit. They arrived home laden with trophies and ornaments to enjoy the few weeks left before the hard slog of training for a new season." The match against Fall River would be no more than a footnote in Celtic history, but for the tragic loss of John Thompson in September 1931. Their goalkeeper had so impressed Willie Maley that in the shattering aftermath of Thompson's death, he cabled an offer to Fall River, and James, always known as Joe Kennaway, arrived in Scotland with his new wife Loretta on the 29th of October 1931 and signed for Celtic the following day. He would be Celtic's first choice keeper until the outbreak of World War II. John Kearney writes in Heroes Are Forever, "Joe's happy demeanour and confident North American grin were the first chinks of light in a dark year, and a cheering portent of brighter times to come."